Good morning, afternoon, evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'm George Moss, host of the program here at allpointstv.com. The program called What's Going On, and we come on at 2 o'clock and stay around for about an hour, or however long you can take us. We hope you look at all the programs here at allpointstv.com because we have a lot of good programs here. And I can tell you that people work very hard before they come before the cameras, and they put a lot of time into it and invest a lot of the energy into putting on a quality program. And we do it because we care about the listening audience, and we think that your time is valuable. And when we come before the cameras, we try to do a little something different than what is happening in the run-of-the-mill, and some of it is not run-of-the-mill, but quality programs in the area of journalism. And the alphabet soup in terms of cable, the news stations. And we try to come here to do something a little bit different. So I want you to stay tuned to all the programs here. This program comes on at 2 o'clock, and it proceeds every second and fourth Mondays. The program that comes on after this program called Soros Black History Corner. And that comes on the 3:30 to about 4 o'clock. It hangs around for about 30 minutes. And it comes on every second and fourth Mondays. They'll be here next week. Glad to have you here, and I hope you stay tuned. I've been writing about the election that was held on November the 8th, and I really thought that after the election was over, I'd be able to spend more time reading and not spend so much time on Facebook trying to make sure that we all are watching events very carefully, because we want to make sure that we are staying tuned to the developments. They seem to change on a daily basis. And it is really quite interesting that we had an election. It'll be, a month ago, 3 days from now. We had an election on November the 8th. And you would think that part of the electoral process has been put to bed in terms of what the decision was made by the voters. And we still are fighting through the maze to get to the other side to determine who is going to be the next president of the United States. Some civics lessons have been taught here in terms of what the vote was on November the 8th. Most persons thought, I'm sure, I won't say most persons, but I think a great deal of the persons, a great number of persons thought that when they went to the poll, the ballot was cast, and therefore the determinative role had been played by the voters as to who will be the next president. And they're finding out that that vote is more or less of a point of direction toward the vote that really determines the president. In other words, the popular vote, the vote that was held November the 8th, was a vote that actually was pointing to another process that is not quite as visible, but certainly as important, if not more so important. The popular vote is an indirect vote, and it points to the direct vote, which is the electoral vote, that is yet to be held, and to be held the latter part of this month, the middle part of this month, on the 19th. And we'll talk about how that process operates. But the popular vote really is an indirect vote, and it doesn't really speak to the direct election of the president. It is an indirect vote where you're voting on that date for the electors, who in turn will go to their respective capitals in the 50 states, and there are 50 states. We want to make sure we understand they're not 57 states unless we add 7 more states. But the 50 states, and those 50 states, the last of which was Alaska, 49, and these are the non-contiguous states, and Hawaii, which was the 50th state. Alaska and Hawaii added 59 and thereafter. So we have 50 states, and we have 538 electoral votes. And the way that is summed up is we have the same number of electoral votes that we have as members in the House of Representatives. There are 435 members in the House. and 100 members in the Senate. That makes 535, and then the 3 electoral votes that were given to the nation's capital, the District of Columbia, that were disenfranchised, quite frankly, in terms of choosing the president. And so they are given the number of electoral votes that they would have if Washington, D.C. was in fact a state. And because every state must have at least 3 electoral votes. Wyoming, for example, has 3 electoral votes. The smallest states would have at least 3 electoral votes, meaning they would have the 2 senators that all states have, and they have 1 member in the House, must have at least 1 representative in the House of Representatives. And so that would give them 3 persons in Congress, and you have the same number of electoral votes, you have members in Congress. And so they have 538 electoral votes, 535 for the states, and then 3 electoral votes for the District of Columbia, making a total of 538. The way that process operates, and you're finding out more about it as we go through this process, which has everybody now riveted to what is going on, trying to figure out why we still have this open-ended approach. I think it's quite frankly an assault upon the integrity of the electoral system, to have persons still trying to change the way we do business in this country in the orderly transference of power, which I think that goes back to the greatness of George Washington, who stepped down in 1797 and peacefully transferred power to the next person elected into the presidential office, John Adams, and Washington did not stay around to continue to run repeatedly as president, because he was not, and that's to his great credit, was not one of those persons that was in pursuit of power. They had almost horse power upon the shoulders of George Washington. The only president who was elected unanimously, by the Electoral College, no other person stands there. I think Madison might have stood in that space, but one of the electors did not want to muddy up the prescient moment of George Washington, and one person in the Electoral College voted against Madison, just for the reason that nobody should stand in the same space as George Washington stands. And I would concur with that, even on Mount Rushmore. I'm thinking about it. I think George Washington should be on the other side of that mountain, quite frankly, standing alone. It's okay for him to stand with the other 3.
Did you notice there's no Democrats on Mount Rushmore?
No Democrats.
You know why? Because they're not all that great. I mean, I'm sorry. I mean, they're not worth immortalizing. They're the biggest person they love the most.
Yeah.
Is FDR.
Yeah.
He was an elitist person who actually caused the country go into such a skewer to actually take away all individual rights. They probably don't want to acknowledge him on that level, so they basically basically it's probably logistics, the planning and that was already done. But I don't see any Democrat belonging there. I don't. I'm sorry, I don't really see many Republicans does, and even Abraham Lincoln I have issues with, but.
And at the point in which Mount Rushmore was being created, which was 1925. We were in the 30th president at that time, so we've gone through 30 presidents. We've had 44, so Calvin Coolidge was the president at that time, and so we've gone through 30 presidents. And you're right.
Yeah, but Jefferson was a Democrat by Democrat-Republican, but they'll try to use them as they'll say the party of Jefferson. If Jefferson were to come alive now and see what the Democratic Party currently is doing and advocating, he'd want their heads. Okay, so I mean, there's no way. There's such a big disconnect between the Democratic Party of Jefferson era, the Jefferson Democrat-Republican, and what the Democratic Party is now. There's almost they don't follow each other. They definitely don't.
Yeah, that split in the Democratic-Republican rank, where it became the Democratic Party and the Republican Party, took place in 1828 with the election of Andrew Jackson. And because Andrew Jackson had been called a jackass, not that I think he was that, but the politics is the name calling didn't just start recently, and they call him they call him a jackass during the election, and so the donkey became the symbol of the Democratic Party, and that split occurred during that time period, and Jackson became the first Democratic presidential nominee. If you want to know the particulars of the Republican Party, you can go and see the running of that party, which was created in 1854. And I think it was, you get different arguments about it, but I think it was created in Jackson, Michigan. So I think this state can take a bow for having been the place where this party was created. And its first office holder as first president was Abraham Lincoln. So both have a greatness in that respect. I think Jackson was, and when I say greatness, I don't want to say greatness. I want to say a president that put his footprints in the sands of time, because I don't put anyone up there, quite frankly. I was saying this earlier about Mount Rushmore. I don't think anybody belongs up there that's next to George Washington. You can certainly talk about other presidents, and on the wall on Mount Rushmore, those carvings that started in 1925, George Washington, that is on the outer left side, and then Thomas Jefferson right next to Washington, then Abraham Lincoln, and then on the outside, Theodore Roosevelt. And I do understand that each one had a moment in time in which there was something that happened that was of some special interest during their administration. With Jefferson, you had the annexation of the 530 million acres of land added in the Louisiana Purchase in 1803. So I do understand that that would be something that added to the territorial acclamation of the nation. And so I can understand why he would be up there, although I think they put him up there because of his role in the Declaration of Independence and not because of anything that he did so that stands out so greatly in the presidency. I would give him credit, though, for having stood against John Adams's administration and signing into law that which was anti the things they had fought for in the Revolutionary War, where he signed into law in 1798 the Alien Sedition Act, and was throwing people in jail for having some criticism of the government and forgetting we had put into place in 1793 the Bill of Rights and the right to the freedom of speech, not the freedom of expression, which is what the court did in 1989, don't tell me, in the Texas versus Johnson case of 1989, when the court expanded its speech into expression, where that is not in the Constitution. And I'm going to hopefully be writing to the president-elect once he takes office about the need to understand how the court, Brennan, and who else was on there? Even Scalia. I was surprised to find that Scalia was one of the persons that wrote that burning the flag was speech. And before that, speech was considered to be talking. But now if you set the flag on fire, as of 1989, where they had 48 states that were declaring burning the flag was a violation of law, and the court changed that in terms of an appeal made by a person by the name of Johnson, who had burned the flag and was represented by this guy, this radical lawyer named William Consular. You may know him from some of the things he was involved in, such as his defense of Bobby Seale in the courtroom, where they put a tape over Bobby Seale's mouth and tied him down to his chair because he kept interrupting the judge. And that was a very infamous trial also, where William Consular was a radical lawyer. And this burning of the flag was one of the cases he defended, and the court finally, after some appeals up to the Supreme Court, the court sided with in that case of Johnson versus Texas, and for the first time ruled that burning the flag is free speech, but yet no talking is going on. I think that's a travesty ruling, by the way. But I give Jefferson credit for being a standout, but I think stand out more for his role in the writing of the language that justified to the world why they were in fact severing their ties with the mother country, something that was a new standard in terms of him having to explain to the world what they were doing, because quite frankly, that had never been done before, and they had to explain it. A lot of things they were doing for the first time. So I give them credit for that. Maybe there should be some standing on that wall away from Washington, but on the wall, maybe on the other side of it. In terms of Abraham Lincoln, I'm not a Lincoln fan, by the way, and I think Lincoln is given too much credit. And I suggest the reading of some of the books, one of which is written by this fabulous writer named Thomas De Lorenzo, where he has a book out called Lincoln Unmasked, and a follow-up book, which is the book called Lincoln, The Real Lincoln. And there's some books called Lincoln Reconsidered, and books that are beginning to reevaluate the 16th president of the United States.
Didn't Obama take his oath of office, at least the first time, or using the Bible that allegedly was connected to Lincoln's inauguration? When I heard that, I said, to me it's like we're knowing the history, and it's recast. We grew up hearing how Lincoln was a great president. But when you look back at what the country's supposed to have been and what he did in regards to allegedly try to keep the Union, he basically he did everything in the opposition to what the country was set upon. And yet some people want to call him out. And then again, also, if he didn't hold it together, could we even had a country with countries so close to us being, another country? Would they'd be ripe for picking from European powers, basically? So it's kind of a double-edged sword. He did some bad things, but then ultimately he did keep the country together. But what price did he come by doing
700,000 American lives. I think the country would have been kept together in terms of them going out and finding out that, first of all, the going out, there was no threat to slavery inside of the country. In fact, the argument really was that they were saying they're going to have, in some ways, and I'm not saying they were saying this directly, but indirectly as part of the conversation, that they'd have the slavery outside of the Union, and Lincoln's status really was they would have slavery inside the Union. This war was not over slavery. This war was over a taxation policy that affected the South to the disadvantage of the southern states. And that's why this secessionist movement was, in fact, enjoined, starting with South Carolina and 6 other states. And then after Lincoln tried to press them back into the Union, there were 4 states that understood the Constitution better than Lincoln understood it, or maybe Lincoln understood it and wasn't willing to follow it. And they then joined with the other 7 states once Lincoln tried to bully them back into the Union on the military force. And once that occurred, they understood the Constitution and how it was set up. And they knew that South Carolina and the other 6 states had the right to succeed if they so chose to do so. And when Lincoln tried to enforce that by the reinforcement at Fort Sumter, by reinforcing the provisions there, this was an act of war because Fort Sumter was on foreign soil once South Carolina had succeeded from the Union. And by the way, this was not a civil war. This was a war, a taxation war, and it resembled the war of 1776 in terms of the same issue that made the 13 colonies rise up against the federal power, if you want to call it that, across the waters in Great Britain with the Parliament under King George III. Then this is what this war was about in 1861 when they were standing up against the central power of the federal government. And you have to go back and read it and see it for yourself. But a lot of things that we have there, I wouldn't put Lincoln on the wall, quite frankly, because of the amount of blood that was shed. If you look at the amount of blood that was shed in that 4-year war, and you then base it upon the population numbers at that time, and then you aggregate the numbers out to the present time period, it amounts to about 5 million lives commensurate with the population at that time compared to the population this time. And if you say that the Holocaust is 6 million lives, then 5 million lives is what that would amount to, proportionally speaking. And that is not someone that I think should be admired and placed on the wall next to on the other side of the great George Washington.
See, the Holocaust allegedly they had 6 million people killed who were Jewish. But if you add up what happened during World War II, the estimate goes up for all the people, because not everybody was a combatant, not everybody was a Nazi. There's like 32 million people. Yes. 32 million people, souls lost over basically I don't. I mean, what is a bit? But did you ever try to analyze where conflicts come from? They come from difference in values, and people want to just discredit or scoff at the idea of morality and ethics. But that's what we've killed or been killed or threatened to be killed over is somebody else's interpretation of what they're allowed to do and what your place in the world to them is. Mm-hmm. So basically, everything comes down. All conflicts arise from conflicts in values.
Right.
And and that's it's a crux of why we should study history and study morality and always constantly check ourselves. But that's not done.
John, you're making an excellent point. The Holocaust is defined by those who lost 6 million members that were targeted for genocide. But all war really is about genocide in the sense that you are trying to eliminate the will of the other person to fight. And the war's not really over until he stops fighting, the other side stops fighting. And it stopped fighting when you decimated the numbers to the point where you're taking all the fight out of the other side. So war is really about genocide. But in the Jewish case, they claim, even in the Holocaust of World War II, they claim Holocaust exclusivity, meaning that it is only happening, although the war is much wider than this, they're claiming that between 33 and 45, the 12-year period, that there is a Holocaust targeting of the Jewish population, but you target population on the battlefield. That's targeting also, and that's genocidal targeting as well. And any Holocaust has to have S on it, because there are many Holocausts in history, many wars in history, and many population decimated on the battlefield and off the battlefield. So it's not just one event. And I consider it being Holocaust in this country here in terms of the so-called Civil War, which is not a civil war. It's a war. Civil war is a war where you fight for the power within the same territorial boundary. And that war is not what this war is about. This war is a war of 11 states trying to vacate their union affiliation, which they had voluntarily come together as states to form a United States. We, the people of the United States, in order to form a more perfect union. And they are voluntarily coming together to do that. And so the bequeathal to the future was one in which the states had given to form a perfect union. And if they found the union to be imperfectly formed, not to their satisfaction, then the onus of the responsibility falls upon those states then to withdraw from that, which is what is spelled out in the Declaration of Independence. And that's what they were using, by the way, in the South. It's not written in history books, but they're using the Declaration of Independence to justify their secessionist efforts. And they were going back to the founders and claiming that's what had been done at the very beginning points of the nation's history. And of course, it was disallowed there, just as it was disallowed by King George III. So I see Lincoln in a different prism. But be that as it may, and then over there on the other side of Lincoln would be Theodore Roosevelt, who came into office in 1901 from the death of William McKinley. And I would put the Bull Moose Party candidate, didn't win as the Bull Moose Party, but ran as on the Republican ticket, but vacated that in 1912 when he had fallen out with William Howard Taft, and Taft wasn't vacating his position, having been elected in 1908, and so didn't get the nomination in the Republican Party, but split the Republican Party by building a progressive party. I don't know why it's not claimed the Progressive Party, but that's part of the the hidden history also. Call it the Bull Moose Party, but it's a progressive party.
And then look what the Progressive Party did. They took over lands that they got acquired through the Spanish-American War. Then they did that to the native people that they got now new control of. They did just as bad, or if not worse, things than the Spanish had done to the Filipinos, the Cubans, the Puerto Ricans. They've done those. They've done the same thing. So I mean, basically, like Pat Buchanan years ago wrote that book. It's a republic, not an empire. And that's what people. It's just missed because so many people are so not aware. Years ago, people were more aware of the politics.
Yes,
they were more aware of where this thing, and they were more outraged by this.
Mm-hmm. You're making great points. The history is a little bit different than what is put in the textbooks. because history is his story. It's a story of the heroic efforts of a group writing about itself. And guess who is always a winner in the writing of history? The person is writing it, and the nation is writing it. And they write it to their advantage because they are building themselves up at the expense of others. And that may be well within the purview of what Napoleon was talking about when he said the history is a fable that is agreed upon. Because you have to agree upon what the facts are, and every nation agrees upon and writes it from his own vantage point. When a lion writes history, it won't be the lion hunter that wins the lion's confrontation with the lion. If the lion writes history, then the lion is going to be the king in the writing of that history, because the lion will have the pen, and probably he'll have the gun too. Because you make a hero or shero in the writing of the history from your vantage point. I mean, history is all about hero worship, and you worship your own history. You make that. In fact, history is made sacred in terms of the telling of it from the standpoint of the storyteller. The historian is his story in it. So I just irrigate the great Washington, but we have had, based upon his standard that he set, we have the peaceful transference of history. And that's why I so much disappreciate what is happening right now, because it does a disservice to the country, but it does a disservice to the first one who stood in the presidential position, who could have stood differently. He had the power to do so. There were no laws in the books. We didn't have laws in the books about the limiting of the presidential power in this country in terms of many times can you run for the office until 1951 with the 22nd Amendment, passed in the aftermath of Roosevelt, who didn't think he should leave office and ran for the presidential office on 4 different occasions. First of all in 32, again in 36, refused to step down in 40, ran again for a third term, and then having succeeded in that domain and having broken the 2-term precedent set by George Washington, ran for a 4th term. And I don't know what would happen if he had not been sickly. You could see him sitting at Yalta between Churchill and Stalin, and you can see he was very frail at that point, and you can see that he was even dying at that time, and ran for a 4th term. But at least it was a peaceful transference of power in the sense that there was nobody challenging the right of the person who had won the election to stand in the place of the president. But I think this is something different than I just heard Rush Limbaugh talking about it. I don't think Limbaugh is right. Limbaugh was saying on radio a few minutes ago before I came to the studio that this attempt to challenge Donald Trump is just because they're trying to delegitimize his presidency once he takes office. And I don't think that's a correct analysis of this. And I'm really surprised that that's a narrative that people of the stature of Limbaugh and some of the others are pushing. That's not what this is about. I don't know if they are. I don't know if they've taken into consideration in their analysis that there is a multi-tiered approach going on here, and this is an assault upon the integrity of the election process. It's not just Jill Stein, who has no standing in the election herself, because Jill Stein was of no consequence in the election. She didn't carry a single state and didn't get close to it. And Jill Stein not standing there because she has any standing in the outcome of the election. She's not going to be elected one way or the other, and she has no real reason to believe the state she's challenging the election outcome in, that there was anything that went on untoward in those elections, in Michigan and Pennsylvania and in Wisconsin, the 3 states that she's actually challenging. But it's not just Jill Stein that's in fact doing that. There's another thing going on behind the scenes. This is visible what she's involved in, but there's something going on behind the scenes in terms of the 512, I think at last count, of organized efforts that were in place to call up the 538 electors and try to get them to change their mind in terms of validating the outcome of the election on November the 8th. And when they go to the Electoral College in each of the 50 states, they will in fact vote what their parties, what their states did, and be what you call faithless electors, and they disaffect from Donald Trump in sufficient numbers that will change the electoral outcome that's in fact dictated but not mandated. I mean, it's directed. The popular vote is a direction. It directs. It doesn't mandate, except in those states, I think 27 states. I think where they pass a law that you are legally bound to do what the state did as far as its popular vote. But it's not mandated in all of the states. And so it directs the electors to vote a certain way based upon the popular vote in those states. They don't have that here in this state, for example. They don't have it in Pennsylvania, I don't think. And they don't have it in Wisconsin. And in those states where you have, like in Wisconsin, they have 10 electoral votes. And in Michigan, the state where this program is taped from, they have 16 electoral votes, meaning 14 members in the House and 2 members in the Senate, as all states have. And then in Pennsylvania, they have 20 electoral votes. So there's 46 total electoral votes. And so what they're trying to do, and I think that's what Rush Limbaugh and some of those are missing, the attempt on Jill Stein's part, and I think in back of Jill Stein is George Soros, who's actually financing this effort. I think if you dig deep enough, you'll find George Soros's thumbprint, his fingerprints, and all the other prints, maybe his footprints.
Is he even a U.S. citizen? Because he's been all over.
Dual citizen.
Yes, yes. I think that every senator and congressman too that has Israeli joint U.S. citizenship with Israel and other countries, they should either denounce it, renounce it, or face removal from office. Because this is BS having people like that in power. And he shouldn't be. He's wanted in other European countries too for malfeasance.
He sure is. Yeah. Russia wants him as well, and if he moves, you see, he doesn't go on a vacation.
No, and thing is, where he goes, he don't make things better. He's got this idea he's going to help. He's like the savior, and he's not.
George Soros is I'll say this on the air. I think it's very clear from his record. George Soros is suffering dementia. This is a very sick man. You could tell by some of the comments he made, where you said that he has gotten pleasure out of some of the things he's done in terms of the suffering he's caused in Europe. Some of the economies have collapsed because of his policies, his fiduciary policies, and his fiscal policies that he has helped put in place. And he seems to enjoy causing pain. And some of the comments he made, if you just go back and look at some of the statements he made, you can see that there's some problems here.
Actually, I don't think he is demented. I think he's always been that way. From what I've heard and read, he's always been that way. So I just label him as evil. I call him evil.
I don't mean dementia. I don't mean dementia in terms of like he is going in and out of state of consciousness and he's not aware of his environment and things. I mean, when I say demented, I don't mean to say dementia. I mean the man is demented. I mean in the sense of there being a pathological issue that has to be addressed. And I think, quite frankly, Obama has that problem. I think Obama's background has created some problems, some storms, if you will.
All these visionaries scare me. These ideas of visionaries, like Clinton said, my vision for America. These people, see, what they're saying with that wording is that they're these omniscient, unassailable emperors that you just basically, they got power now. They're going to create this country in their image.
Yeah.
And that's what it comes across to me. My vision.
Yeah.
My vision. Oh, the only people I knew who had visions were people dropping acid with mushrooms. Okay. So I mean, I don't trust people who have visions. Okay.
I don't either. John, Thomas Sowell has a book out called The Vision of the Anointed. And you could probably say that about most persons that pursue power. I mean, they really, I keep coming back to this point that I think that's the problem that Lord Acton had. Lord Acton said in the 19th century that power tends to corrupt, and absolute power corrupts absolutely. And I think Lord Acton was looking at it from a political standpoint. You know, you look at politicians wielding power in the political arena, you see that they are corrupt, and you look at the power they're wielding, and he ascribed and imposed upon the corruption the power that they're wielding, and so he saw it as a power issue. But I think it starts in terms of at another prescient moment. I don't think it starts there. I think it starts in terms of the kind of people that pursue power. I mean, if you pursue virtue, for example, then the person pursuing virtue is a virtuous person because he's pursuing virtue, and it comes from a virtuous place in the pursuit. But is a person virtuous in terms of pursuing power? Is that the reason why they are running to be over nations, or which is to be over people? Is that why they're running? I mean, is it really about public service?
But see, they got to see, like Machiavelli. Machiavelli said, you know, it's not the sovereign doesn't have to be pious; he just has to appear pious. And the thing is, I've taught one thing I did learn in my sociology class was over at Mott, and it was a really unorthodox class. Something I don't have to tell you about it, but basically, they came up with one thing I thought was really prescient, really kind of nailed it home. Is the professor taught that everybody, even though they're doing horrific deeds, want to be perceived as being good. Okay, so the idea of taking morality, the table of values that people have, and saying, look, I'm doing this for this. And people swallow that. They'll go along with it. Oh, yeah, you've murdered millions, but ultimately it's going to be a greater outcome. Right. Where you're gooder. Yeah. You know, gooder than the guys in power now, or better than the people in power. So basically, even the psychopath, the sociopath, wants you to think they're good. Yeah. So, I mean, and that's what politicians are. They're sociopaths. They're sociopaths, and they want you to think they're public servants. But if you're a public servant, you ought to see some evidence of public service. And can anybody tell me where the public service is located in terms of what they're doing in Washington, and why we call in Washington a swamp? If it's a place where public service is being done, it's certainly not a swamp. But nobody's arguing when Donald Trump said he's going to Washington to clean up the swamp, and that became at the end of his campaign in the general election. Nobody was complaining that it's not a swamp. I didn't hear any defenders out there raising a hand objecting. They were joining in the chant. And we're going to go there and the rest of the audience would join in and say, to clean up the swamp. So does that sound like they believe that there's public service being done in the nation's capital? Oh, like you see, if Bill and Hillary just had their law practice and they never got into politics, how much would their net value be worth? Yeah. I'd say maybe a few $100,000. Yeah. How many? What it's worth now? Millions and millions and millions of dollars? Yeah, hundreds of millions. Yeah. $300 million is by one count. And most of those persons in Washington would be unemployable. If they weren't on the government dime, when the public doles, what kind of job will these persons be doing? Can you see these persons doing it 9 to 5? What about Paul Ryan? What job do you think Paul Ryan? I don't want to pick on Paul Ryan, but since he's visible. He's over there in the House, right? He's Speaker of the House. Okay, what about Mitch McConnell over there in the Senate, Majority Leader? And then the Minority Leader, Nancy Pelosi. You keep putting her back in there. The woman has lost. The Democratic Party they have a learning curve that's down here. It's not up there on the ceiling with Lionel Richie. I mean, they're not up there dancing on the ceiling. They're down here in the doldrums. And they keep putting in the power over and over again, going back to the same well, and the well has been dry, and they keep losing seats. They don't learn anything. And what job can you see Nancy Pelosi doing? And if we can understand that, then we understand why we have these career politicians. They won't leave office. They can't do anything else. Maybe a greeter at the Walmart. Could you see that? I mean, she seems like affable. I mean, I'm not knocking that. I mean, matter of fact, I think the people, the local ones, are probably more qualified than she is. But I mean, that's a good place for her to start, maybe. You know. Yeah, I mean, and I don't think they would be attentive to doing a job. I mean, they'd be minimum wage workers, most of them, because what were they doing when they ran for office? Did they leave lucrative positions? You know, there are a few.
But most of them that are career politicians don't have anything else to go to.
Well, they were political
like Ron Paul. Ron Paul went back. See, Ron Paul was a practicing medic. This is Dr. Ron Paul.
Dr. Rand Paul. Ron and Rand. They're both doctors.
And Rand. That's right, both of them.
One's an eye doctor, the other one's an obstetrician
gynecologist. That's exactly right. They had a field of expertise. But do you think most of those guys up there that are always talking about, we always talk about public servants, do you see any evidence of that anywhere where they're doing public service?
Another thing, when they were in college, they went to either pre-law, law, or political science. Pseudoscience, political science. So I mean, they're basically studying how to get power, how to use power, or how to create the power by creating the law. So I mean, that's what kind of people you got going in there, But I mean, and Ron Paul delivered over 5,000 babies in his career. 5,000 babies.
Yeah,
that's a caring individual. Any of the others guys, I would not want them near my children. Okay,
right, John, you send farmers to the nation's capital, and they will stay there for a period of time. And the farm needs work, and they got to return back to the farm, and they would leave. And they didn't put anything in the law. I mean, there was nothing in there. There's nothing in the Constitution now except for the president. That was put in there in 1951 with the 22nd Amendment to restrict the president. But there's nothing in there that restricts the members of the House and restricts the members of the Senate. Those guys can run in perpetuity, which is what they're doing. And it was just intended to be a place where you go there, you do something in terms of you serve the country to the extent that you're able to do it based upon the issues you bring to the table, because you go there to do something. You see something out of order, and you go there to fix it. And then once you fix that, you don't know the rest of the stuff. Some other stuff get broken. And you can fix that too? No, you go there to fix what you went there to fix based upon your understanding of what was wrong when you got there. And that really is why Donald Trump has ran. Trump did not intend to come down those stairs. I mean, the escalator. He wasn't walking down the stairs, but riding down the escalator on June the 16th, 2015. He came down the escalator in Trump Tower. And he announced that he was running for president of the United States. But why did he do that? He didn't do it because he was broke. The man is a builder.
Another thing is, too, if you want to look at it, what he's stands now about, and some people can have different arguments about the tariffs, and he's proposing for business to leave the United States. And there's issues with it, but he's actually cutting his own economic throat. Because let's face it, he's tied to the business community. You don't think there's going to be a backlash when he goes back into the real world, when he leaves office, when after that his term is up? He's potentially facing horrific, consequences by taking that stand. So he's actually being more self-sacrificing than any of the other idiots, the bozos that ran our office, been in the presidency.
Yeah, I was going to turn to Article 1, Section 8. Donald Trump is more, they keep saying this man doesn't know anything about the Constitution. This man is more true to the Constitution than most of them have been in office. And this idea, we got to understand what is happening in America and why there's so much that got to be fixed, because we're so far away from the Constitution that we've got to paddle back to shores here. We are in the middle of the ocean. And one of the things that has to be understood is why 70,000 companies have picked up and moved out of this country. And they've been pushed out of the country, quite frankly, by the tax policies of the United States. And everybody that's running a business that could have gotten out of here under these conditions would have gotten out of here, because and I think they've been pushed out deliberately by the socialists, the redistributionists, by the tax policies of the country. When you understand how the tax policies operate, you'll understand what they're doing. It's very clever, but what they're doing is that they are, in fact, placing high taxes on the productive efforts inside the country, the highest in the industrialized world, 35% production cost. You put 35% on top of cost of doing business and put a 35% tax on top of that. You don't think companies will leave out of here? Particularly on the other side of that, you then do not tax the goods that are produced on the outside of the country. And when they come back in the country, those goods that are imported into the country are not taxed. Go back and look at the Constitution, where the framers had put in place the ability of the federal government to tax commerce that comes into the country, but could not tax commerce going out of the country. You can't tax even today. You don't tax exports in this country. They're not taxing imports, which is what was intended by the framers. And why would they do that? I mean, can we figure this out? They are, through the back door, redistributing wealth in this country. And they are creating the middle class in Mexico, creating the middle class in India, and creating the middle class in China, and destroying the middle class here in the United States. And they're doing that because they're globalists. In order for the globalists to reach out and achieve their objectives, they had to bring this country down. Because as long as this country is doing well, why would they want to go into a globalist arrangement if it's doing well as a state that stands on its own economically and so on and so forth? So it's being weakened within by these globalists that are found in both parties. And George Soros is a representative of that. And that's what this election really is about. Because Donald Trump is not a globalist. Donald Trump is a nationalist. And they're trying to make nationalism something that is bad. I don't know why Steve Bannon was even trying to defend himself against a claim that he is a nationalist, a white nationalist. I mean, I looked at him, he is white. And he is for the nation, having his own health, having his own sovereignty, having his own independence. So what would that make him? And I wish we'd have some black nationalists, but I don't mean black nationalists in terms of everybody wearing this kente cloth over here. You know, in Africa, you're wearing kente cloth to try to get tenure. Over here, in kente cloth is not worn, but you don't have kente cloth worn in Ghana, generally in Ghana, except I didn't see any kente cloth worn, quite frankly, except when they came there, like Dr. Kosher Purby. I had some great conversation with her, who's in that film called Gates's Peace, the wonders of the African world. Gates's 6-part series in 2000 on PBS. And I didn't see, she bring the kente cloth and, over her shoulder when she was teaching, and I gave me a gift of that when I was there, but I didn't see them wearing that as a group go around and putting their chests out as this group, because that would be a separatist type of thing that would be in Ghana. Why are you wearing that? To show your ethnic allegiance when you're all Ghanaians. And so you don't see them wearing it there. They're over here wearing it on these college campuses as a way of standing out, and I think it's a tenure track type of thing to politically correct the environment and so on.
Did you ever wear the accoutrements of office for your Igbo chief, being an Igbo chief in the classroom?
No, I didn't. I would teach it. I would bring these. I would use a day to talk about the symbols and all that. But I would also say this: when I was going through the Igbo ceremony in Owerri, Nigeria, that's on the southeastern part of Nigeria, I would tell them that when I was going through the ritual, every part of the ritual had to be explained to me. I'm an Igbo chief now, but I had to go through the ritual, and I made a lot of mistakes in it. And they had to explain to me every step of the way what I was in fact doing. Because I could tell them and read until the cows came home how we do things over here. But we make a big mistake thinking that because we claim these things that we know how it's done over there. We don't have any understanding of those things. What I learned on my way to becoming an Igbo chief was really amazing to me. And I could say a lot of things about that.
That's got to be overwhelming, because my mom's Hungarian, and I met up with a relative that doesn't speak English, came over here from Hungary about 20 some years ago. And basically, all I was left was nodding and smiling at each other because I didn't understand English and he didn't understand. I couldn't speak Hungarian. He didn't understand much English. And I started thinking, if all these people say they're going back to some place, like it's like, well, if I ever were to go back to Hungary, I'd be like a fish out of some little fish bowl. I mean, I wouldn't even know what to do. So I mean, all this going back to stuff, I can't imagine that.
And even if you go back, see, I've gone back, but you see, you're going back as a visitor. See, this idea of going back, you got to first of all, you have to go there for the first time. Is that right? You have to go back there. You have to go there for the first time and then go back. But in going back, you went there the first time as a visitor, and when you go back, you're going there as a visitor, going back again as a visitor. You're not going there as a claiming of a homeland. You never had a homeland there in the first place. And this kind of stuff that is going on is really disingenuous, and it's really to an extent dishonest. It's kind of like a waving of the flag, and they don't do that over there because it will be seen that way. Why are they doing it over here then? It's like a waving the flag. That you did once through slavery, so you owe me this. These entitlements right now, and I'm wearing this as a way of reminding you of the fact that of the slave trade and all of these things that happened therein and the history that came after that. And it's just like a guilt type of a thing that they are practicing. It's not spoken as such, but that's really the meaning of it. And it has no meaning, and they don't wear stuff. You go over there to Africa, I tell you what, you wear the kente cloth in Nigeria. There's some people in Nigeria, like the Igbos. The Igbos would not wear. The one lady put on a Yoruba outfit, and all the Igbo was wondering, are you trying to forego your Igbo roots? I guess she had a boyfriend that was Yoruba, but for her to put that on was an insult, and they don't wear. They wear an outfit that's an African outfit, but there are certain things that identify them as Igbo. I mean, I've seen some things that are Igbo that are not some things you see in other parts of Nigeria. But they don't want to flout it because they'll be seen as an insult to the other person's, cultural reference. And they don't do it, but over here they do it. And it's disingenuous, it's dishonest. And I see it because I'm traveling internationally, so I've been in 17 countries in Africa, so I know exactly what they do there, and I know what they're doing here and why they're doing it. It's dishonest. But, Donald Trump, going back to the point about this presidential thing, Donald Trump has actually accomplished something. This is an accomplished man, and his $1 billion was in fact done by him knowing how the business world operates. But I don't think that he's met the kind of people that he's meeting right now, and will meet them and watch them, because this is something different here. Somebody asked me on Facebook yesterday, in terms of a post that I wrote, as I was calling out these dangerous figures: Barack Obama, George Soros, Hillary Clinton, and Jill Stein, who based on what they're doing right now, are some of the most dangerous persons in the country, because they're playing with fire here. We've had an election, and for them to try to secure this to go around what has already happened and what's been in place all the way back to 1797, when George Washington stepped down, to try to intervene in that and then overhaul it and to point it in a different direction it was not intended to go through, that's a problem. And they have to be very careful here. And I'm trying to warn against recklessness, which is what this is really about. Because this is not just what Rush Limbaugh said. Limbaugh is not correct. This is not just about trying to delegitimize Donald Trump's presidency once he takes office. This is trying to prevent him from taking office. If it was just about what Limbaugh said, it would just be that they are, just looking at the ballot and seeing if he stole anything and all of that. That's not what they're doing. They're also calling people up. They're calling these electors up, and they're trying to get that number down to 269. If they, for example, were able to hold off these three states, I said earlier, these three states have 46 electoral votes. You subtract 46